Once upon a time, God's people, the Israelites, had been slaves in Egypt for many years. But God did something amazing. Through his servant Moses, God set them free with great miracles, like parting the Red Sea so they could escape. For 40 years, the Israelites traveled through the big, hot desert. God took care of them every day. He gave them special bread called manna from heaven and made water come from rocks when they were thirsty. Moses was their brave leader who talked with God. But one sad day, Moses grew very old. Before he died, God showed him the beautiful promised land from a mountain top. Then Joshua, Moses' helper, became the new leader. Joshua was a little scared. Leading so many people was a big job. But God promised to be with him, just like he was with Moses. Now the Israelites were ready for their biggest adventure yet, which was going into the land God promised them. But first, they had to face a giant problem, the huge walls of Jericho. God told his people, "I'm giving you a wonderful new home, a land full of good things." This special place was called Canaan. Canaan had everything they needed: sweet honey from bees, creamy milk from cows, tall fruit trees, and fields of golden grain. But there was one big problem: a giant city stood in their way. Its name was Jericho. Jericho had walls as high as 3 houses stacked up, a big gate that stayed locked tight, and a king who didn't like God's people. Would God's promise come true? Could they ever get past Jericho's mighty walls? One night, Joshua sat alone, worrying. "How will I lead all these people?" he whispered. "Moses was so brave, but me." Suddenly, whoosh, a bright light appeared. Joshua jumped up. There stood someone shining like the sun, with a sword in hand. "Don't be afraid," the angel said. "I'm from God." Joshua fell to his knees. "Are you for us or against us?" "I'm the commander of God's army," the angel replied. "Take off your sandals, you're standing on holy ground." Then God's voice spoke to Joshua's heart. "Joshua, be strong and brave. I will be with you like I was with Moses. Wherever you go, I'll go too. Just obey my words, and don't be afraid." Joshua's hand stopped shaking. "But God," he asked, "how will we beat Jericho's giant walls?" God answered, "My ways are different than yours. Just trust me, I have a perfect plan." Joshua had an idea. "Let's send 2 brave men to spy on Jericho," he said. So, 2 Israelites sneaked up to the giant walls just as the sun was setting. They were scared as they slipped through the city gates before they closed for the night. The spies needed a place to hide. They found a house built right into the city wall, the perfect spot to watch everything. This was Rahab's house. Rahab wasn't like the other people in Jericho. She had heard amazing stories about how God protected the Israelites, and she believed in their God. When soldiers came knocking, Rahab hid the spies quickly. "Hurry," she whispered, helping them climb up to her flat roof. She covered them with piles of drying flax stalks. The soldiers burst in, demanding, "Where are those Israelite spies?" "They left before the gates closed," she lied. "If you hurry, you might catch them." As soon as the soldiers ran off, Rahab hurried up to the roof. "You must promise to save me and my family when your people take Jericho," she pleaded. The spies agreed. "Tie this red rope in your window so we'll know which house to protect." That night, Rahab helped them escape through her window using a long rope. They climbed down the outside of the wall and hid in the hills for 3 days before returning to Joshua. Rahab watched them go, then carefully tied the bright red rope in her window. She didn't know how, but she believed God would keep his promise, just like he did for the Israelites. The big day finally came. Joshua told everyone, "Pack your things, we're crossing the Jordan River today." The people looked at the wide, rushing river and gulped. "How will we ever cross this?" the children asked, clinging to their parents' hands. Joshua remembered God's promise. "Priests, carry the Ark of God's covenant into the water first," he commanded. As soon as the priests' toes touched the river's edge, something amazing happened. Upstream, the rushing water suddenly stopped. It piled up in a big wall, just like when God parted the Red Sea for Moses. The riverbed became dry ground right before their eyes. "Look," shouted a little boy, pointing. "The fish are swimming in place like they're frozen." Mothers and fathers hugged each other with tears in their eyes. God is with us just like he was with our parents, they whispered. The priests stood firm in the middle of the dry riverbed as all the people hurried across. Children skipped on the damp ground where water usually flowed, picking up smooth river stones as souvenirs. When the last person reached the other side, Joshua told 12 men to carry big stones from the riverbed. These will help us remember God's miracle forever, he said. As soon as everyone was safe, the waters came rushing back with a mighty roar. That day, everyone knew that the same powerful God who saved their parents was now watching over them, too. One quiet evening, Joshua walked alone near Jericho's towering walls. Suddenly, a bright light flashed before him. Joshua gasped as a mighty warrior appeared, his sword glowing like fire. "Are you friend or foe?" Joshua asked bravely, though his knees trembled. The shining warrior answered, "I am neither. I am the commander of God's army." Joshua immediately fell face down in respect. "What message does my Lord have for me?" "Take off your sandals," the commander said gently. "You are standing on holy ground." As Joshua untied his sandals, he felt God's presence like a warm blanket. The angel continued, "God has heard your prayers. Jericho's walls will fall, but not by swords or strength. Follow God's unusual plan exactly." When Joshua looked up, the angel was gone. But his heart burned with courage. God hadn't just sent an angel, he had sent his whole army. That night, Joshua stopped worrying and started trusting. Joshua called all the people together, his face glowing with excitement. "God has given us a special plan to defeat Jericho," he announced. The crowd leaned forward, expecting to hear about swords and shields. "Here's what we'll do," Joshua continued. "For 6 days, our priests will carry the beautiful golden ark of God's covenant around the city walls. 7 priests will walk in front, blowing their curly ram's horn trumpets. All the soldiers will march behind them in silence." The people blinked in confusion. A little boy tugged his father's robe. "Daddy, where are the swords?" he whispered loudly. Joshua smiled. "On the 7th day, we'll march 7 times around Jericho. Then, when you hear the long trumpet blast, I want everyone to shout as loud as you can." The ark glittered in the sunlight as the priests lifted it. Its golden angel's wings shone brightly, and the precious stones on the priests' clothes sparkled. The ram's horns made a funny ba-ba sound when the priests practiced blowing them, making some children giggle. "But Joshua," an old man asked, scratching his beard, "how can trumpets and shouting knock down walls?" Joshua's eyes twinkled. "With God, all things are possible. Remember the Red Sea. Remember the Jordan River. This will be our greatest miracle yet." That night, families whispered around their campfires. Some felt nervous, others excited. But they all agreed on one thing: if God said it would work, then it would work. The children practiced their loudest shouts while mothers packed special marching snacks. Everyone wondered what would happen when they followed God's unusual plan. The first morning dawned bright and clear as the Israelites gathered before Jericho's massive walls. Little Miriam held her father's hand tightly as the priests lifted the golden ark. The 7 trumpets gave a mighty blast. Bah! That made her jump. "Remember," Joshua reminded everyone, "no talking until I say." Miriam walked quietly beside her parents, her sandals kicking up dust as they marched. Up on the walls, she saw Jericho's people pointing and laughing. "Look at those silly Israelites," a man shouted. "Do they think walking will break our walls?" His laughter made Miriam's face feel hot. Each day was the same strange march. On day 3, Miriam noticed some Jericho faces looked worried instead of laughing. "Why are they marching?" she heard a woman whisper nervously. By day 5, no one on the walls was laughing anymore. The city gates stayed shut tight. Miriam saw soldiers peeking over the walls, their eyes wide with fear. On the 6th day, Miriam's little brother David tugged her sleeve. "I'm tired of being quiet." But their mother shushed him gently. "God's plan needs our obedience," she whispered. That night around the campfire, Miriam heard grown-ups whispering about how the Jericho people were so scared they couldn't sleep. The Israelite children collected smooth stones from the march path, making little piles to count the days. Miriam kept looking at the towering walls that seemed to touch the sky. How could shouting ever make them fall? But she remembered the Red Sea stories her grandparents told, and a little spark of hope flickered in her heart. Tomorrow would be the 7th day. Something amazing was about to happen. The morning of the 7th day felt different. Miriam woke before the sun was up, her heart pounding like a little drum. Today, they would march 7 times around Jericho. She helped her little brother tie his sandals with shaky fingers. The whole camp moved quietly in the pink dawn light. The priests' golden robes glowed as they lifted the ark. The ram's horns gave their familiar baa, but today the sound seemed louder, stronger. Miriam counted each lap around the huge walls. 1, 2, 3. By the 5th lap, her feet ached, but she kept walking. Upon the walls, the Jericho people looked terrified. Some were crying. Others held their children close. A little Jericho girl about Miriam's age stared down at her with wide, frightened eyes. On the 7th lap, Joshua raised his hands. The trumpets gave one final, ear-splitting blast that made everyone jump. Then Joshua shouted, "Now! Shout, people of God! Shout with all your might!" Miriam took the deepest breath she ever had. "Ah!" she screamed with thousands of others. The sound crashed against the walls like a giant wave. Then came a sound like thunder. Kerak! A huge zigzag line appeared in the wall right where the little Jericho girl had been standing. The stones began to tremble. Dust puffed out between the cracks. "Look out!" someone screamed as the entire wall started leaning. Then with a roar like 1,000 lions, the mighty walls of Jericho crashed down. Stones as big as houses tumbled like toy blocks. The ground shook so hard that Miriam fell to her knees. A huge cloud of dust whooshed up, making everyone cough. Through the dusty haze, Miriam saw that the wall had fallen flat, except for one small section where a red rope hung from a window. Rahob's house. "Charge!" Joshua commanded. The Israelite soldiers ran forward, their shouts mixing with the screams of surprised Jericho soldiers. The battle was over almost before it began. God had given them the victory in the most amazing way. Miriam stood shaking, staring at the broken walls. She picked up a warm stone from the fallen wall and put it in her pocket. She would keep it forever to remember the day God made walls fall just because his people obeyed and shouted. As the dust settled, 2 Israelite soldiers came running toward the only part of the wall still standing. "Rahob! Rahob!" They called up to the window with the red rope. The wooden shutter burst open. Rahob's face appeared, streaked with tears but shining with joy. Her whole family crowded behind her, her parents, brothers, sisters, even her old grandmother. They had all believed Rahob's promise about the God who saves. The soldiers helped them climb down carefully. Rahob's little brother was shaking so much he nearly slipped, but strong hands caught him. When her feet touched the ground, Rahob fell to her knees. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Her father kept turning in circles, staring at the fallen walls. "We watched you march every day," he said in awe. "When the walls shook, we held each other and prayed to your God." The spies smiled. "Now he is your God too." Joshua came and gently placed his cloak around Rahob's shoulders. "Welcome to God's family," he said. As they walked to safety, Rahob looked back just once at the broken city where she used to live. Ahead lay a new life with people who walked with the one true God. After the walls fell, Joshua gave special instructions. "Burn everything in the city," he said, "except the shiny gold, silver, and metal things. Those belong to God." The children watched wide-eyed as flames climbed high into the sky. The straw roofs went poof, like birthday candles. The wooden houses crackled like campfires. Even the big palace burned until only black stones remained. But the priests carefully collected all the treasures, golden cups, silver coins, and bronze pots. These went into God's special treasury. No taking souvenirs. Joshua warned. As the smoke curled upward, everyone remembered Rahob's red rope still hanging safely on her wall. Her house stood untouched in the middle of all the destruction, just like the spies promised. The next morning, Joshua gathered everyone. "Now we go to our next adventure," he said. But someone in camp had been naughty, and God knew all about it. While everyone else obeyed God's rules about Jericho's treasures, one man named Achan peeked at the shiny things the priests had gathered. His eyes grew big when he saw a beautiful robe from Babylon, so soft and colorful. Nearby glittered a wedge of gold and some silver coins. I could hide just these few things, Achan whispered to himself. No one will ever know. That night, when camp was quiet, Achan tiptoed like a sneaky mouse to God's treasury. He grabbed the robe, gold, and silver. Quick as a rabbit, he dashed back to his tent and dug a deep hole under his sleeping mat. The treasures disappeared into the dark earth. But someone did see. God's happy smile over his people faded. The next morning, when Joshua sent soldiers to the next town called Ai, something terrible happened. The strong Israelite army ran away scared. 30 soldiers got hurt. Joshua fell face down in the dirt, crying to God, "Why did this happen?" God answered, "Someone stole what belonged to me. The people cannot win battles until this wrong is made right." Back in camp, children noticed their parents whispering worriedly. The happy singing around campfires stopped. Even the camp dogs seemed to walk quietly. God's special protection had lifted because of one man's secret sin. Achan's treasures were still hidden under his tent, but not for long. Joshua woke all the people early the next morning. "God says the thief must come forward," he announced. The crowd murmured nervously as families lined up tribe by tribe. God helped Joshua narrow it down, first to Achan's tribe, then to his family, and finally to Achan himself. When his name was called, Achan's face turned white as sheep's wool. His knees knocked together like sticks in the wind. I did it," Achan confessed in a shaky voice. "I saw a beautiful robe, some silver, and gold. I wanted them so badly I took them. They're buried in my tent." Messengers ran to Achan's tent and returned carrying the glittering treasures. The colorful robe fluttered in the breeze like a sad flag. Everyone gasped when they saw the stolen items. Joshua's face looked very serious. "Achan, why did you bring us such trouble? Today God will punish your disobedience." The people learned a hard lesson that day. Because of Achan's sin, he and his family lost their place in Israel's camp. The treasures were destroyed, just like everything in Jericho should have been. Afterward, Joshua reminded everyone, God wants us to obey completely, no secrets, no little sins. The children hugged their parents tightly, understanding for the first time how one person's bad choices could affect many others. After the sad events with Achan, Joshua gathered all the people together. The children sat cross-legged in the front, their faces serious as they remembered the burned treasures and empty tent where Achan's family used to live. Joshua spoke in a voice that carried across the quiet crowd, "Let's remember what God teaches us today." He held up 3 fingers. "First," he said, bending one finger, "God sees everything, even what we do in secret. When he says don't take, he means it." The children peeked at their own pockets, thinking about times they'd taken cookies without asking. "Second," Joshua continued, bending another finger, "one person's disobedience can hurt many people." He reminded them how 30 soldiers got hurt at Ai because of Achan's sin. Little Benjamin squeezed his sister's hand, understanding how his own naughty choices sometimes made trouble for his family. "Third," Joshua said, bending his last finger, "God gives second chances." He pointed toward the road ahead. "Now that we've made things right, God will walk with us again." The people cheered, their hope returning. As they packed up camp, mothers and fathers reminded their children, "Obey completely, love God fully, and remember, he always sees with loving eyes." With their hearts right again, the Israelites marched forward into the land God promised them. The same God who made Jericho's walls fall helped them win battle after battle. At Ai, Joshua used clever tactics just like God showed him. Other cities heard about Jericho and trembled. Some kings ran away scared. Each victory brought them deeper into the land of milk and honey. Children tasted sweet figs from enemy vineyards and splashed in cool streams their parents had only dreamed about. Joshua kept reminding everyone, "These wins aren't from our strength, they're God's gifts." And so the people learned to trust him more with every new sunrise in their promised home. After Jericho's amazing victory, Joshua and God's people kept moving forward. At the next city called Ai, they fought smarter and won. News spread fast. Kings shivered in their palaces when they heard the Israelites were coming. One by one, cities fell like dominoes. The children giggled as they tasted their first grapes from Canaan's vines, so big it took 2 hands to hold one. Families moved into new homes they didn't build and picked fruit from trees they didn't plant, just like God promised. Every night around campfires, grandparents would say, "See, children, when we obey God, He fights our battles for us." And the stars twinkled above their new home. That red rope in her window changed Rahab's life forever. She and her family became part of God's people, learning all about His love. Years later, Rahab married an Israelite man named Salmon. Their family grew and grew through the generations. One grandson was named Boaz, a kind farmer who would marry another brave woman named Ruth. Many years later, one of Rahab's many greats, grandchildren became the earthly father of someone very special, Jesus. The same Rahab who once hid spies in Jericho became part of God's biggest promise. Every Christmas, when we hear about Jesus' family tree, Rahab's name is there. Her story shows that God loves everyone, no matter where they come from, and can use ordinary people in His amazing plans. That little red rope didn't just save Rahab's life that day in Jericho. It connected her to God's greatest gift of all. For years and years, parents told their children about Jericho's tumbling walls. Around crackling campfires, grandpas would imitate the trumpet sounds, making the little ones giggle. Grandmothers would whisper about brave Rahab while mending clothes with scarlet thread. When the Israelites finally built the temple in Jerusalem, priests kept a special jar of Jericho stones. "Touch these," they'd tell wide-eyed kids. These came from walls that fell because people trusted God. Even today, when you see a red ribbon blowing in the wind, remember, it's telling Rahab's story all over again. God's amazing miracles never get old. Many years later, people with shovels and brushes came to dig at Jericho. Guess what they found? The old broken walls are just like the Bible says. The walls didn't fall inward or outward, they fell flat, just like when children knock over block towers. The archaeologists found jars still full of grain from that time. The people left in such a hurry that they didn't even take their food. When mom says, "Clean your room," or the teacher says, "Do your work," remember Achan's story. Obeying completely makes everyone happier. What's one thing you can obey today with a smile? The story of Jericho teaches us that God's ways are often surprising but always perfect. When Joshua and the Israelites followed God's unusual plan to march around the city, it probably seemed silly to everyone watching. But their obedience led to one of the Bible's most spectacular miracles. This reminds us that when God asks us to do something, whether it's being kind to someone who's unkind, telling the truth when it's hard, or sharing when we'd rather keep things for ourselves, we can trust that His plan is best, even if we don't understand it at first. Rahab's story shows us that God welcomes anyone who turns to Him, no matter their past. Though she had been living very differently before, her faith in God changed everything. Her courage to help the spies wasn't forgotten. God made her part of His big story, even including her in Jesus' family tree. This teaches us that it's never too late to start following God, and that He can use anyone willing to trust Him. Achan's sad story warns us about the danger of hidden disobedience. His secret sin affected the whole community, just like our wrong choices often hurt others around us, too. But the good news is that when we confess our mistakes, God is ready to forgive and help us start fresh. The tumbling walls remind us that no problem is too big for God. Whatever walls we face, fears, challenges, or impossible seeming situations, God can help us through them when we rely on Him. Just like the Israelites didn't need fancy weapons but just needed to obey and trust, we don't have to depend on our strength either. Most importantly, this story shows that God keeps His promises. After 40 years of waiting, He brought His people into the promised land just as He said He would. When we read about Jericho today, we're reminded that we can count on God's words just as much as Joshua did. Whether He promises to always be with us, to forgive us when we ask, or to work everything for our good, God never breaks His word. Every time we see a red ribbon or hear a trumpet sound, we can remember Jericho and these wonderful truths. The walls may be dust now, but the lessons stand strong forever. Obey God even when it seems odd, include others like Rahab did, avoid hidden sins like Achan's, and always remember, with God, nothing is impossible. These aren't just ancient ideas but living lessons that can guide us every day as we walk with our powerful, promise-keeping God. Don't forget to like this story, comment your thought and share.